Okay, so before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which Carleton University operates and where I am gathered with you today is on the unsurrendered traditional territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. And I'm grateful to be a guest on this land where I live, work, play, and we would also like to acknowledge the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island and encourage everyone to reflect on the traditional territory you are currently located on, and to consider and think about your relationship to the land. So essentially today I will just do a quick overview of the project. I'll take a couple minutes and then I'll pass the floor to Dr. Grace Tidmarsh, and then we'll open the floor to questions. And then at the end of the question period, we're going to leave some time to go into our breakout rooms. So these are our communities of practice, one which is focused on researchers, one that is focused on service providers or coaches, and finally our closed community of practice with our community advisory board members. So I would like to acknowledge how grateful we are for the funding that has been provided through the Public Health Agency of Canada. And this research and our project is really designed to support trauma and violence-informed physical activity programming. So we are over halfway through the grant and halfway through our community-based interventions. And we have over 130 self-identified women and over 90 children who have taken part in our programming across Ottawa, Vancouver, and Toronto. So today I would like to welcome Dr. Grace Tidmarsh, who is a postdoctoral and research fellow from the University of Birmingham, and her expertise lies in process evaluations and translating sports psychology to complex community settings. So I've had the pleasure to connect with Grace when she was in Ottawa for some meetings, and her work and research are really powerful, and we're excited to share it with you folks today. So I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Grace, when you're ready.
Great. So just to say a really big thank you, obviously, for inviting me along to your group and your meetings. And I'm really excited to kind of share with you what our Sprint Project research group have been up to, but also to kind of learn from you guys as well. Very sorry about that. I thought I had just muted the Alexa, but evidently not. So today I'm here to talk to you about the world's best athletes and beyond, thinking about how we translate sports psychology through sort of co-design, co-delivery and co-evaluation of a mental skills training program for young people experiencing homelessness. And I would also like to thank the Economic and Social Research Council for their funding, which over a very long period of time has enabled us to really develop over the last 10 plus years this project with our community partner, St. Basil's. So what it's going to look like is a little bit of an introduction, and I always kind of model these sort of talks and presentations in the way that we might deliver one of our workshop sessions, or the way that we might deliver some of our programs as well. So we'll start with a little check-in. It's the end of the week, it's a Friday, it's been a busy term, so you can just see how everyone's feeling. And then we'll explore a little bit what is sports psychology, and mental skills training, and how does that fit with the UK youth homelessness context. And then we'll delve into a lot more detail on our programme called My Strengths Training for Life, which I guess differs slightly in terms of the fact that it's not per se a physical activity programme, but it's thinking about how we can take key sports psychology concepts to support young people to achieve positive outcomes. And then, as Francine said, there'll be time for some questions as well. So first, I guess what I'd like to do is check in with everyone and see how you're all feeling. You don't have to share if you don't want to, but just maybe take a moment of reflection and see if any of these alpacas hit the spot with how you're vibing today. I think I'm definitely a 3 now because it's Friday evening here in the UK. So made it to the end of the week. I reckon I was probably definitely like a 2 on Monday and Tuesday this week. So hopefully something that will resonate with you. And I guess transitioning into the introductions then, is that there's lots of things that have led me to where to kind of the research path that I'm on right now. And one of those things is the way I've connected with the outdoors through one of these alpacas, which is actually mine, called Jasper. You can see here on the screen. And the other is kind of, I guess, another way in which I've kind of got involved in the outdoors, physical activity, through playing rugby, running, and ballroom and Latin dancing as well. And that really kind of, it was my engagement in physical activity that really sparked my interest in sports psychology as I progressed through my different degrees. I've also done a lot of work in positive youth development and working in alternative education provision with children and young adults who have extensive additional support needs, whether that be physical, psychological, or sort of safeguarding related. And so that led me to my research interests in sort of physical education, pedagogy, the way that we do things, how do we teach, and to really thinking about how do we take a strengths-based approach, and then through working with my colleagues and my previous PhD supervisor, Professor Jen Cumming, really thinking about how we can integrate those key sports psychology values to enable a psychologically informed and strengths-based approach to programme delivery. So my Strength Training for Life, which is the programme I'll come on to talk about later, was initiated by Professor Jen Cumming as the lead, and then myself and Dr. Mary Quinton have been kind of the co-eyes on that project over the last few years. There's some key things in our research group that have really led us to be able to engage in such a kind of co-productive, community-based approach to our research. Things like being mixed methods, trying to be rigorous but flexible in the way that we utilize those methods to meet the needs of the communities that we're working with, thinking about co-production, strengths-based, really thinking about that sort of whole systems approach when we think about ecological systems theories, thinking about how we create impacts and how we evaluate that impact, and again thinking about how we really involve our participants in a way that's inclusive and accessible throughout all stages of the design, delivery and evaluation of our programs. So when we think, I guess, transitioning now into the sports psychology part of the talk, when we think about the world's best athletes, or even, however you get involved in any physical activity that you might do, what you might think about immediately is the sort of the physical strength and fitness, any like skill related abilities, nutrition, how successful someone is in competition. And they're the bits that primarily sort of focus our thoughts typically when we think about athletes and their success. But what we don't think about is actually how athletes use their mind to perform better. And that's where sports psychology comes in. So sports psychology really helps athletes to improve and maintain their psychological functioning. And there's 4 key components to psychological functioning. And I apologize if I'm kind of preaching to the choir, and some of you might already know this. So we've got sort of behavior, what we do. So for example, do we go to the gym or not? Our emotions, so the way we experience and express things like anger, nerves, happiness. Our social skills, so our ability to ask for support when we need it. So that could be from a coach, for example, if we're struggling with a certain type of skill acquisition. And then our mental health, so our ability, so our general emotional well-being, and also our ability to manage our emotional well-being. So within that, we then have something called mental skills training, and this is kind of like the I guess if you think about a basic kit to make something, this is kind of like this is your building blocks when you're starting out as a sports psychologist. And kind of one of the key things that you tend to draw back to in your applied practice. And that's mental skill training, or MST, as I'll now refer to it as. And that kind of has 4 key concepts which enable an individual to move along the continuum of self-regulation. So when we think of self-regulation, we don't just have, you know, one end or the other, and you're down at this bottom end here. And if you do all of this mental skills training, you're suddenly going to be at the top. It's really just about thinking, how can we help someone make a nudge along this continuum? And the ways that we do that is through delivering MST with a basic psychological needs style when we're delivering the different activities. And the activities are basically designed to help athletes, or in this case, young people, to develop key mental techniques. So this could be a breathing technique, the use of imagery, or a self-talk. And basically, the more they practice these mental techniques, the more they develop mental skills, such as the ability to regulate their own emotions, cognitive and behavioral states. So thinking back to those components of psychological functioning. And then the more they implement those mental skills, essentially it enables someone to develop mental qualities which are much more sort of robust and enduring, even through times that are more challenging and difficult. So that could be, for example, confidence that doesn't waver when you sort of transition from your comfort zone into your stretch zone. So that's kind of the one of the underpinning approaches of the My Strengths Training for Life program. So why is MST appropriate for responding to complex and co-occurring needs? So the average adult brain takes up to 25 years to fully develop. So for a lot of the young people that we work with who are experiencing youth homelessness or other sort of multiple disadvantages, these sort of adverse childhood experiences can really impact brain development, and especially the part of the brain which is responsible for our emotion regulation, our ability to make decisions, the way we assess risk, for example. So when this is delayed, it kind of further impacts brain development, and then the behaviors that we often see are therefore more reminiscent of someone of a younger age, and that's partly due to the way that brain development's been impacted. However, even with that said, luckily for all of us, our brains have got lots of neuroplasticity in them, which means that we can still learn and develop skills related to our emotional awareness and regulation at any point in life. So essentially what we're saying is that by using mental skills training, because of the neuroplasticity in the brain, we can still really improve our psychological functioning. And a really unique thing about sort of MST and sports psychology is that, as I'm sure you can resonate with in a lot of your own work, is that for people that have gone through adverse experiences or lots of trauma and have needed lots of support from different systems, is that actually engaging with these formal systems can actually feel quite prohibitive when they've been sort of repeatedly let down by them. So taking this kind of sport-based approach is a less formal, even though it's underpinned by lots of other clinical type psychologies, really helps the young people to overcome some of those barriers to engage. So in the UK, we're still waiting on our 2023-2024 stats to come out. But last year, 36,000 young people sought support for experiences of risk of homelessness. And that's a shocking number based on our sort of population. And also sort of thinking about that's only the young people that have come forward for support, and therefore the numbers experiencing this is likely to be much, much higher. The map that you can see here, that basically the darker the colour, the higher the instances of youth homelessness in that area for the UK. Also, we can see that one of the main reasons for experiencing youth homelessness is that sort of lack of willingness of family or friends to continue to accommodate them, domestic abuse, and then sort of other non-violent relationship breakdowns being other causes. And then landlords wishing to sell their property. I have some suspicions that this data might fluctuate slightly over the next couple of years, as we've seen a lot of changes in sort of laws and policies pertaining to landlords, as well as lots of instability in the housing market, which means it's not necessarily as fruitful for landlords to be in the renting market right now. So I'm kind of interested to see how that might change. Our community partner, St Basil's, who we have had the absolute pleasure of working with for over the last 10 years. So they are a local charity to us here in Birmingham in the West Midlands in the UK. And they are a youth homelessness service specifically that caters for young people aged 16 to 25 years of age. St Basil's itself is a psychologically informed environment, and that kind of stems across these key 5 parts of our pie chart. So really thinking about how do they develop a psychological framework to inform their practice across the charity, whether that be from the staff that don't have any direct access with the young people, all the way through to the staff that are the frontline workers living and working in the supported accommodation with the young people. Thinking about how the physical environment and the social spaces work, that staff training and support, how do they manage relationships within service, but also those multi-agency kind of relationships, whether that be with social care, the youth justice system, or whether it might be with researchers like us from the University of Birmingham. And then that ties nicely into their evaluation of outcomes in order to sort of be able to then implement that action learning process to continually improve. So St Basil's, within that psychologically informed environment, has a variety of different services. So they have I think it's over 45 different sites now, and they support approximately 5,000 young people every year. So which is kind of matches in terms of that map where we can see that the West Midlands was one of those darker colours. They have a variety of ways that they support young people. Some of it could be through short-term accommodation, longer-term accommodation, and then sort of outreach and floating support, as well as their the sort of training programs that they deliver, including employability and life skills, and the My Strengths Training for Life program. So MST for Life is a mental skills training program. So thinking about those 4 key bits and the self-regulation, and it was co-produced with staff and young people from St Basil's over 10 years ago now. And it's for young people aged 16 to 24 years old who are accessing support at St Basil's. It's underpinned by this strength-based psychology, psychologically informed environments, positive youth development, self-determination theory, as well as other more clinical-based practices such as solution-focused therapy, dialectical behavioural therapy. So it's kind of like, in some way, like the young people know they're receiving that and they're aware that this is what makes the program. But it's kind of like if you have a child that doesn't, referring to myself now as a child, that doesn't like the texture of certain foods, and then you blend them to like hide them in there so that it's a little bit, they're still getting the goodness without the fear that they have of that thing. So you can see here that it's kind of, we've got a mixture of sessions that are delivered within service. So that's 10 2-hour sessions that helps them to really build and develop those mental skills. And then we take them away on a 3-night, 4-day outdoor adventure education sort of trip, which is kind of like a celebration for them also of making it through those first 10 sessions. But most importantly, it's a really key opportunity for those experiential learning experiences, and for them to try and apply these mental skills in a new but really safe and well managed environment too. as well as an opportunity for them to benefit from engaging in loads of different physical activities that they normally wouldn't potentially have the confidence to do or the means to kind of access. And for them to, you know, Birmingham is a very big central city with lots of skyscrapers and things like that, and not huge amounts of open green space. So it's also a positive opportunity for them to kind of to get some of the benefits of getting sort of immersed into that green space for a few days. So MST for Life, as I said, is kind of getting into its 10th year now. So the development of the program and the pilot study took place way back when in 2013. Then it had a main rollout period of around 3 years, and that was where the program was delivered by sports psychology experts from the university. And then from 2018 to 2000 and sort of 2019, halfway through because of COVID, we were working on how we ensure that the program can be sustainable after we leave as a research team. And that's where we delivered then our co-delivery training and fully embedding this approach into the employability coach team at St Basil's, who were the ones delivering the MST for Life program. And then beyond that, since then, we've co-created essentially an MST for Life toolkit, so that this is a freely available resource for other people who might want to implement MST for Life, as well as trying to help other organisations embed types of MST programs into their service provision too. So essentially, the way MST for Life works through using mental skills training is that we provide the young people with challenging and meaningful activities that gives them the opportunity to build different skills, and really also importantly is to build those positive relationships with their peers, but also with adults who although we, through a psychologically informed approach, we aim to balance out that power, but sometimes those adults who they still perceive to be in a position of power. In the short term, that helps the young people to improve and recognize their strengths and their mental skills, as well as then improve their well-being and decrease their engagement in unhealthy and risky behaviors. And again, this is really a continuum depending on each individual. So for one young person, it could stop using cannabis, for example, or for another young person, it might be that they cut down their use by half. So it's really not just thinking about those sort of polar opposites of these continuums. And in the long term, we then hope to see that, and we have evidence to support that the program helps young people to re-engage or to engage for the first time in education, employment, training, and those to sort of sustain that independent living that they're supported to achieve through receiving the support of St Basil's. So the next few slides, what I really want to show you is a few examples of some of the activities that we include in the program. So one is called the Strengths Profile, and this is taken from performance profiling in sports psychology, and was sort of developed particularly by my colleague, Dr. Sam Cooley, as part of his PhD. And it's where the young people kind of, the way it works, if it's a group, is they'll brainstorm some different strengths they can think of. And then they might pick out 2 or 3 that they think, hey, you know what, I'm great at that. And it's thinking about how do we get them to recognize their strengths, because sometimes they don't know what the words are for the thing that they're really good at doing. So, okay, maybe they make a shopping list before they go out and do their weekly food shop. Okay, well, great. What looks like you're really great at getting organized. So it's really helping them to pick out the key terms, because that also then helps them recognize what they're doing and how they're using their strengths, but also it gives them key terminology for things when they're applying for like educational training programs or thinking about how they can get back into employment. We're also equipping them with key terminology that employers might be looking out for. They then essentially rate where they think they are out of 10 currently, and then where they'd like to be, what's their ideal place, because it might not be 10 for everybody, and we would probably advocate that it wouldn't be 10 for everybody. And then essentially they can then say, okay, well, in the next 6 weeks, I'm currently a 4, maybe I want to get to a 7. In the next 6 weeks, how do I get to a 5? So really thinking about how they can use goal setting to help them make these incremental nudges along these continuums. Another kind of activity that we use is something called the Dream Team. And this is really about helping the young people to get comfortable and really understand who are the people that are in their support network that they can turn to. And we take this based on kind of a football example. So thinking about who is in a football team, including like on the pitch, as well as those support staff off the pitch. And basically, this is in the toolkits. So it tells you all about how to deliver this session. And you might think about, okay, well, who is my medic? When things go wrong and I just need someone right now to help me or to look after me when I'm not well, who is that I go to? And then we have these little examples here, and then the young person would fill out these kind of little cards, and then they'd essentially, there's 4 more, so there's 8. And then they'd either have a pack of 8 where they can then think, right, when I'm having this problem, this is who I can go to for that. But also what we found over time is that some of the young people would go, I don't really have anyone that's filling that role right now. So what do I need to do? How can I figure out how I can get more support in this way in my life? So it kind of fulfills sort of multi-purpose roles in their acknowledgement of support, and really helps them to kind of try and acknowledge and expand their support network too. Another key thing, and I guess this really helps in terms of that moving along in their abilities to self-regulate, and then to improve that psychological functioning, is the emotional awareness session that we deliver as part of MST for Life. And again, this one is also in the toolkit. So really it's about getting them to explore that it's not as simple as emotions just being positive or negative. I think we tend to be like, oh, someone's angry, that's a horrific thing, that's really negative. But actually every single emotion that we feel is useful for us. It's just about our ability to regulate, manage, and learn and recognize what the message is that we're being told by that feeling. So for example, if you might be frustrated about something, why are you frustrated about it? Does it mean that someone's crossed a boundary and you need to reinforce that boundary? Or if you're feeling upset about something, does it mean, okay, well, maybe that's right now I need to not engage in that kind of conversation with somebody? Or maybe if I'm upset about something, I need to look at my support network, who I now know about because I've done the Dream Team, and kind of get in touch with someone there to help me navigate through the fact that I'm feeling upset. So that's another one of the key things. And typically in the sports psychology sense, we'd use that with athletes to help them regulate their emotions, say prior to competition, for example. So as I said, all of those activities are available in our freely accessible toolkits on the Sprint Project website. And I'm just going to pop the link hopefully into the chat now. Oh, and it's great to see this, which alpaca some of you are feeling like as well. So thanks for sharing that, everyone. Sorry, I was not in the chat before. Hopefully, yeah. So that's the website there for you. And then if you go across on the top to toolkits, you'll be able to freely download all the PDFs of those. And there's also the QR code, and I will send around the slides to Gabby and Francine as well. And I'm happy for them to sort of share the PDF of those after too. So I guess a really key thing is we've spoken about what we do on the programme and how we've developed it and worked with the staff and the young people to deliver this programme. But really, how do we evaluate it? Because evaluating something in these complex settings, when you've got young people to consider, the staff to consider, the commissioners to consider, who are who are giving the services the money to be able to invest alongside the research grants to deliver a program like this. And one of the key things we really tried to focus on as a team when we evaluated MSc for Life was not just thinking about the outcomes, but in terms of that sustainability and understanding how and why the program works, was to really think about the processes as well. So the outcomes is obviously this lovely cupcake with our strawberry on top. But what we need to really know is, this is like our program design down here, the recipe. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to deliver, so that we get this lovely cupcake at the end. But what happens is everybody just tends to really focus on, oh, the cupcake, look what we did. But what we need to know is, well, what did we actually do and how did we get this cupcake at the end? Did we deviate from the recipe? If we did, why? It's not always a problem. Sometimes it's great that we've deviated because we've had to in that situation. But what's important is that we know how we did it and why we did it in case we need to replicate that to inform any changes to program design. So we've got a variety of papers on the evaluation of MST for Life, and I'm going to just pick out a few key points on the next slides, because I'm also really keen to keep some time for the discussions too. So MST for Life has reached well over 600 young people now within St Basil's charity. And we've been able to engage with quite a diverse set of young people based on the characteristics of the general population of our area, and sort of thinking about their gender, whether they're looking for work or get back into education, employment and training, for example, as well as a broad range of ethnicity too. Birmingham itself is very multicultural, so this is fairly representative of that. Then in terms of the program itself, we have found that it creates significant improvements in young people's engagement in programs, their optimism, resilience, a sort of a very significant finding in terms of the improvements in their self-worth, and also improvements in their feelings of happiness as well. And if you want more information on that, you can see the paper that my colleague Mary has written. Another really key thing that we found is, and I guess this relates a lot more to the processes, is that it's not just what you deliver, it's how you deliver. And this is where I guess really starts to relate to your trauma and violence informed physical activity programs. So it's kind of, it doesn't matter whether you necessarily deliver the exact same session, but if you always deliver the session in a psychologically informed or a trauma informed way, that is going to really help the participants engage and feel empowered. So you can see here that in some of the evaluation we've done on the delivery style, the extent to which that has had a positive impact that isn't necessarily captured in those statistics that we just had on the previous slide. So it really goes to show what we can achieve when you have faith in yourself, and that faith stems from the fact that the facilitators believe in us, young homeless people who live in a hostel and often feel like we've been forgotten about by the rest of society. For them to come and show how passionate they are about us as young people, it only reinforces the fact that we do matter, and that's brilliant. So I always find that quite really powerful, because I think it just goes to show that the how we do stuff is so integral to when we deliver programs, but understanding and being able to evaluate that is also really important so that we can justify why these approaches are needed. So we use something called the CARES model as our delivery style, and for the sake of time, I'm just happy to answer some more questions on that if you want any more detail around that, because I could do a whole nother hour just on this. So essentially, this is really based on self-determination theory, thinking about that competence, autonomy, and relatedness support, and then some of those communication approaches too. One of the ways we've evaluated this is through a bespoke fidelity, so like an adherence measurement tool. And this tool sort of served the purpose of being able to see where program deliverers were able to adhere to the CARES model, and also where they then exhibited behaviours that didn't adhere to the CARES model. And this was based on a scale of 0 to 3, so 0 not exhibited at all, and 3 exhibited regularly and sort of with conviction. And then there was also kind of more reflective type questions, and this was a 29 item scale sort of measure, and this was filled out by observers who were trained to observe the MST for Life sessions, and that they were sort of systematically chosen. And then after every single delivery of an MST for Life session, the deliveries, so the facilitator would complete one of these reflection forms. So it was a real opportunity for them to kind of, again, that action learning approach. You know, yes, this data is great, but also we want it to have an impact at the time to really help the staff so that what they're investing their time in is beneficial for their applied practice as well, because when that happens, then they are better able to support the young people. So what we found was that there was a slight difference in these. So this was the first year of trying to deliver this sustainable approach, where we were training the frontline staff to co-deliver the program. But overall, what we found was that the combined average had a high fidelity to the delivery style, which is great, because that means we know that the frontline staff with further training and further ability and support to help them learn how to reflect in this way would be able to deliver the program without us there too. Another approach that we used is diary rooms, so a little bit like Big Brother, where the young people had loads of choice and autonomy about how they could engage with this kind of evaluation. It meant they didn't have to write things down, they weren't completing a questionnaire, because we had so many barriers initially trying to get them to engage in those kind of materials. I've also developed this other soft outcomes tool, which again is another bespoke one that we've co-developed with our community partner St Basil's. And this is really trying to look at the development of soft outcomes that we don't capture in that statistical type analysis, but that the way that these soft outcomes or behaviors are kind of, you know, someone might fill out a mental health questionnaire, but actually they might not show any significant change, but sometimes the frontline service staff will go, they stopped cleaning their bedroom 3 weeks ago, I can tell something's about to happen, or some kind of decline is happening. So it's about really helping us to try and learn about these more nuanced changes and feed this back to commissioners so that they can understand that measures of success and progress aren't just those statistical kind of key performance indicators. We have 4 key strategic areas of impact based on the programme and within our research group. And we kind of tried to get across all of those across the programme. And again, I'm just happy to discuss that in a bit more detail after. What we're really trying to do now is broaden the reach of the mental skills training toolkits, and we've started to do that through them obviously being freely available on our website and supporting other organisations to implement MST. And we also have interactive activities on the website too. So basically where you can do the activities in the toolkits online. And we've also recently partnered with an app called Get Ahead, so taking us back to our sports psychology roots, but there's lots of activities on there informed by our toolkits. So ultimately, we know that strengths-based and psychologically informed service provision and evaluation is essential to help really progress and keep moving away from that deficit-based model where the people that we're working with are at the centre of our approach. We know that programme content and delivery style are both key ingredients to ensure that our programmes are successful in achieving the aims that we want to. And that we really need to enhance current and future research through more interdisciplinary working to really help benefit that applied practice. So I guess I just have a few sort of reflective questions that you might want to think about in terms of some of the stuff I've shared with you. And then you can find out more and keep up to date through our Sprint Project website. My connection details are just there. and I'm sure you'll be able to access them as well when the slides go round. So yeah, thank you all for listening. I'm going to stop sharing there.